I'm going to start the video with a few still images of machining the base. It's made from 10mm black acrylic and machined on my CNC router. The bottom is engraved, and I also use M3 brass inserts to secure both halves of the base together. Once that's done, I will then be drilling and tapping the back of the base to take the M3 grub screws that will hold the panels in place. Then I will use wet and dry paper to prepare the base and then polish the sides of the base so they end up with a really nice polished finished. Once that's done, the base is ready to assemble. Hi guys, it's Graham. I thought I'd put together a quick video on how I make the bases for my edge-lit LED logo signs. I machine them out of 10mm black acrylic. This is the top, and also there is the bottom. Prior to this piece of the video, I've included some still shots on the machining process for these. It's done on a CNC router. I also these days include an aluminium heatsink which is embedded into the base. I generally found that when I'm using particularly RGB and single color 505 strips like this one, they can generate a reasonable amount of heat, especially if I'm incorporating 2 or 3 of them within the one project. So hence I use an aluminium heatsink, and I do that for all my projects these days. This particular base that I'm putting together will incorporate a white 5050 strip and also a blue, and I think this is a 3528 strip, 120 diodes per meter. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So the first operation is for me to secure the heatsink into the base. So what I've got here is I use some black screws, and they're hex screws. So we'll try and do this. While you're there, we'll put the first one in. I machine the holes slightly rectangular so that I allow for a little bit of allowance in the positioning of when I drill the holes for the heatsink and tap them. So the holes in the heatsink are M3, and I tap them. I'll put the rest of these screws in. I'm probably going to shoot this whole video as one piece, and then I'll edit the stuff out of it, which is taking a little bit of time to do. So ideally, I probably only really need to have 2 screws in, 1 at each end, but I tend to over-engineer things a little bit, so I've got 6. Now, the way that I've set up all my dimensions is when the screws are tightened, they are just flush of the surface of this aluminium strip. Next, what I'll do is, I find that the adhesive that is on the back of the LED strips over time is not quite enough, so I tend to like to add some additional help to that, and this is a double-sided heatsink tape, and it's really sticky, and it just adds that extra hold down for the LED strips, and also adds a little bit of thermal conductivity between the back of the LED strip and the heatsink itself. So what I'm going to do now is put the top on, and I'm just going to mark the edge, the front edge, where that has to go. I make various bases depending on how many layers is going to be on the project. This gap will vary in width to accommodate the LED acrylics. So what I'm doing for this particular job is that it's going to be two colors, and so there'll be two layers. There'll be a front layer which is 8 millimeters, and there'll be a back layer which is 6 millimeters, and behind that there'll be a 4.5 millimeter dark grey layer. So now I've got the heatsink marked, I will place a piece of this double-sided tape, trying to do it on the mark, and it's not strictly necessary to have the double-sided tape, but I just find that I want to get the best conductivity between the back of the diode strip and the heatsink. So I purchased this tape on eBay. I have no idea how much is on this roll, but it's probably going to last me for the rest of my life, because it's so thin. So when I peel that off, so I know that I want the front layer to be white, so I'm going to put a white strip in, and I'm going to trim that to the appropriate length to fit within. Here we go. With the side cutters, and yep, that's going to be right. Now I know the front edge of this black double-sided tape, heatsink tape, is where I want this. The front layer is of acrylic is 8 millimeters. These strips are 10 millimeters wide. So I will position that around about just forward of that, and down we go with that particular one, and there we have it. Now what I often do to check the positioning, I will place the top on, and I will now, I've got some scraps of clear acrylic, which is 8 millimeters, which is going to be the front, and then 6 millimeters for the one color behind that. And I'm just going to check by putting that down what the position of the second LED strip is going to be, and it's basically going to be just on the edge of where the front strip is going to be for optimal position. So I've now got that. This strip doesn't have to be the full width because the back is engraved less than the width of the total base. So now I quite often like to look at, I've got positive and negative there, I've got positive and negative, so I'm going to put the two positives facing each other, so I can just put a very quick solder loop across that. Now I know my position is going to be right if I sit that exactly on the edge of that one. Whoops. And I messed that one up before it got all the way stuck down, because I want that in the center, and I'm looking for where the center actually is. It's going to be about the center there, so I'm going to now put that back down again now. There you go, pushing it all down really nicely, and that's the two LED strips in place. I will check again, and I'll take my two strips. I'll take my 8 at the front, my 6 at the back, and I'll put those in the right position, and that's pretty good. That's going to light up the front. LEDs are in the middle of the 8mm acrylic, and the back LEDs behind that are just on the back edge of the 6mm acrylic. Because the acrylic is engraved on the back side, that's going to work out absolutely perfectly. So that's the two strips in position. What I'll do now is I'll solder the leads on, and I'll come back to you in a second. I'm just in the process of soldering the two strips. I've got to connect positive and negatives on both the strips down. I don't want to use too thick a wire because it'll stand up too high. Okay, I'll continue on with the wiring. Okay, now that I've got the two LED strips paralleled up, I'm going to use my power supply just to quickly check to make sure I've got good connections and everything's okay. So that's negative on there, positive on there, and there we go. Blue at the back, white at the front. You probably can't see that, but it's wiring okay. So now I will attach. I use a female connector so that I can then use a standard 12-volt plug pack to power them. Because this is a fairly simple design, I can just put this straight across. I buy these already. That's a molded connector. I buy these already made up off eBay in batches of about 10 or 20 at a time, because I make quite a few of these, and it just makes life a lot easier than buying the connector separately and buying the cable. They're readily available, so it saves me a lot of trouble. Okay, I'll wire this one to the appropriate points. I cut my slots in here so it's a really tight fit, so the cable's not going to pull out. Now, positive wired, all secure. Now I will plug this into my 12-volt plug pack supply, and voila, we have light. So everything's working beautifully. So unplug that because that's pretty bright in my eyes. Okay, that's all assembled, and push everything back down again just to make sure it's all secure. What I do with my bases, I could just tap the acrylic directly, but I find it's a lot less time consuming to use brass inserts. So when I CNC machine this, I make the holes the appropriate size to use these brass inserts, which are inserted using my soldering iron. There's a couple of still shots at the start showing about that. Now I've got extra holes. I make this so that I can put additional support in if I need it. For instance, if it's going to be a fairly big base and there's going to be like more layers of acrylic. This is around 20.5 millimeters width. I can go up to 25. So that I've got additional strength, I might add additional inserts. But anyway, that's beside the point. So what I do now is I put the top on, check everything's lined up, flip it over, and I've got M3 button head hex screws, and there, in this particular case, there are 6 of them. So we quickly do that, and we do these up. What I do is I'm not tightening them right down at the start, because I want to make sure the two halves of the base are completely lined up, so they're just a little bit short of that, and then I basically put the base down on its face like that on the flat surface like this, making sure that nothing's in the way, and just check that the ends are lined up, and then I just nip up these screws so that they're firm. And that's it. So that's the complete base. You can see the aluminium heatsink is exposed on the bottom, so the heat can get away. The screw heads are protruding. So the final step is I put some little pads in appropriate places on the bottom here. They just will stand the base off. It also allows, means that the screw heads are not touching the bench wherever this is sitting on, but it also stands the base off enough so that it allows airflow underneath to allow for cooling. Get out of there. Okay. That's it. Okay, that's the base basically put together. One final test, and there we go. It's lighting up beautifully. So the next bit will be to put the final assembly together. Now, before I just finish this one, with regard to the heatsink, for this particular application, if I just plug the power back in again, because I've got a meter here that I can monitor. This one is drawing 0.34 amps, 12 volts, and it's about 4.2 watts. So it's not going to get too. This heatsink is going to be quite ample for this to be running 24 hours a day. And I always make my lights with the appropriate design so that they can run continually 24 hours a day. So that's pretty good. I also engrave on the bottom the voltage and the power, the current range that this is going to be working under. So this is well within what's written under here. Now, with regard to the heat sinking, with this one, there's not a lot, but what can happen is if I have a really complex design with, let's say, 3 strips of 5050 strips all running at maximum power, that can draw a fair amount of current and generate a fair amount of heat. So the way I've designed my bases is the fact that if I need to add additional heat sinking, I will be able to stick these small little button heat sinks using my black double-sided thermal tape. I will put them in this position here, just like that. And I'll put a row of them along there. Now I have a larger sign here that I recently did. I can show you that. Now you can see this particular logo I made for a company. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of acrylic, and 4 of those layers are actually lit, so it's got a lot of LEDs in there, and without additional cooling this got pretty warm. So what I've done with this particular one, you can see here, I've added quite an array of these additional little button type heat sinks stuck to the bottom, which dissipate the heat, and this is fine now running all the time. Also what I did is I added some standoffs to actually allow this to stand higher off the desktop, so that it allowed more extra cooling. It's a very complex logo, and I'll include a photograph of this running in the final one. But this is that's the reason I make my design, so that I can accommodate within the one basic concept various configurations of LEDs. So what I'll do now is I'll put this together, and I'll come back to you with what this is going to look like with the final job done. Right, I'm just going to do a quick test now. This is not the final assembly of the logo, but I've got this on a different bench, and I've got the base powered up, and I've got over here I've got my 2 panels ready. I've got the 8mm one, so I'm just going to put that on top of the 6mm because it's going at the back, and I just can never wait to actually see what this is going to actually turn out like, because you never really know with these things, especially with multicolored ones, just how it's all going to work. And I'm just going to quickly just slide these in here. You can see as I put this down, it lights up. Now I don't know whether it's still a bit grubby, and it all needs cleaning up, but you can see here I've got white at the front and the blue at the back coming through. This is the logo for a Ford Cobra that I'm making for a very good friend. So right, here we are. I have disassembled the previous, and now it's time to do this whole job properly in really clean conditions, so that I get the best result. So first of all, I will put on some gloves, because I don't want to get fingerprints on anything. These are disposable and easily obtainable, and I just use them once, so this is going to prevent the dust. And I've got the acrylic pieces all laid out here. What I use is isopropyl alcohol to give the surfaces of the acrylic a really nice clean. I use microfiber cloths, and I give these a spray with the isopropyl alcohol, and I just go over these surfaces really nicely and just give them a quick, no pressure, just a light little brush on both. Now this one is the front, so I don't have to do the other side of this one, because I can do that later because it'll be facing outwards. But this being the back side, which is the engraved side, and this is the second layer, or the middle layer, and the engraved side is going to be opposite to this. So this side here is the one that's going to face this one. I hope you sort of understand all of that. So that's all nice and clean, and this one's all nice and clean, and I put that aside. What I then do is I've got a small compressor down here, and what I like to do is I just quickly like to give all the surfaces a bit of a air brush spray, just to get rid of all possible dust. The air compressor I'm using is one that's basically designed for airbrush painting. It's quite good, and I'm just looking over it the best I can. And what I'm going to do now is these two surfaces are the ones that are going to actually go together. I've got to get these the right way around. Hang on, that's upside down. That's the base of that. You can always tell the base. I try not to slide the surfaces around. Always handling the acrylic by the edges. And now I'll just move that into the center. Right. Now I'm on the back side of this. The next layer that's going to go down on this is the 50% grey layer. So I'm just going to hold my hand under there and stop this from moving down, and I'm just going to give this a little bit of a brush with the microfiber cloth, just really lightly. Again, I'm going to take my compressed air, and I'm going to give this blast of air to get rid of any particles. Make sure everything's lined up again. And what we've got here is the 50% grey. So again, just give that a light clean. And also this one, spray with the compressed air to get rid of any particles of dust. Lift this up, and it's going to go down. I'm not worried about the outside because I can clean that when it's all finally together. So, as I've done in the past, the final, where is my, here it is, screwdriver. I've got the clear acrylic M3 screws down in there, down in there, down in the base, down in the base. Do these up just loosely for a start. I've got to tell you, sometimes I do all of this and something goes wrong. I'll put it all together and there'll be a mark or an embellishment in the acrylic, and honestly I sometimes think, oh yeah, I can polish that out, and I've got polishes over here like this one and all sorts of other polishes, and I'll try and fix it, but honestly it never works. I end up just making it again. There are times when you'll get a piece of acrylic that's got a molding imperfection, because this is cast acrylic, and I've had the piece of acrylic with bugs' wings embedded into the acrylic. Most of it's made in Asia, so the quality control is not fantastic at times. Sometimes there can be a little bubble, it'll be in the wrong place, and under normal circumstances no one's ever going to notice it, but the minute you hit it with edge lighting, any imperfection will glow like a Christmas tree. So quite often when I order acrylic for a job, I will order 2 or 3 times as much, because I have got a stack over here of rejects, and especially if it's for a really important customer that you really want to have it perfect, you may end up having, I've done some jobs up to 3 times before I've got them right, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So anyway, this particular one here is for a friend, so honestly it as long as it's pretty good, that's okay with me. So now I have done this final bit together, I'm going to put these cloths out of the way. Got my base, going to power it up. Here we go. I think you can see that there. I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to drop that into the base. If I can get it all in properly. There you go. And we're looking pretty good. I've got a little bit of cleaning up to do on the front here, but everything's perfect. So there you go. The whole thing's all done. All I've got to do is tighten up the rear grub screws to secure the whole thing into place, and it'll be done. So that's the final part of the process. Compressed air to blow the dust off, isopropyl alcohol to clean the acrylic. Honestly, you'll always get some little specks because it's never going to be absolutely perfect, and I notice them, but honestly the end person looking at it thinks this is just fabulous, and they'll love it. So don't get too paranoid about any little mark unless it's a decent scratch or anything that's significant that you really have to deal with. And as I said, it's easier to make that panel again than it is to try and polish out or remove that mark, because it'll just end up looking worse. So that's it. I hope you have got something out of all of this video, and I wish you luck on doing yours. So possible. What I'm also including with this is one of these. It's a very simple inline RF remote control. The remote control is quite tiny and small. It allows the light to be turned off and then on again, but more importantly, what it also allows is the control of the brightness. It's got 3 fixed buttons: 100%, 50% and 25%, and within those range you've got other buttons up the top here which are plus and minus. So if I, for instance, have that set to 25, I can use the plus button to gradually bring that up a few notches or back down or whatever.
All of my engraving, I choose to use a 0.5mm ball-nosed end mill. The parameters I set are step over at 80%. Depth is 0.5mm. I do a crosshatch pattern, so there are 2 passes. And you can see I end up with a really nice diamond looking shape, and it's a really consistent, high quality result.
Hope you enjoyed the video, and please make any comments below if you have any questions related to it. Thank you.